You ever noticed how when a government tries to fix a law, it seems like they're just setting up the next problem? Well, today we're digging into a really cool concept that explains why. It's called the recursivity of law, and it gets to the heart of why legal reforms can feel like they're stuck in a never-ending loop.
I mean, it's a pattern you see all the time, right? A big new law gets passed to solve some major issue. There are press conferences, celebrations, and then, a few years down the road, everyone's back at the drawing board trying to fix the fix. It's almost like a hamster wheel. So, what is the deal? Why does one solution so often just create a whole new set of problems?
And look, this isn't just some small, annoying thing. Take the 1997 Asian financial crisis. It was a huge deal. Countries like Indonesia and Korea were in a total panic, rushing to pass new laws to keep their economies from collapsing. And you had global players like the IMF and the World Bank showing up with their playbook of solutions. But here's the kicker. A lot of those fixes just didn't work. They either failed outright or they caused brand new headaches, which led to, yep, you guessed it, another frantic round of fixes. So what was really going on here?
To really get it, we've got to look deeper than just blaming politicians. There's something else happening under the hood. It's a powerful cycle that our source material calls the lawmaking feedback loop. And this is where it gets super interesting. When two academics, Terence Holliday and Bruce Carruthers, dug into this, they said, hang on, this isn't just a simple story of bad politics or incompetence. No, they saw a powerful, almost invisible process driving everything, and they gave it a name. They called it the recursivity of law. The core idea is actually pretty simple, but it's a game changer. It's this dynamic cycle where the formal law, the actual text written down, and what people do in the real world are constantly influencing and reshaping each other. It's not a one-way street. It's more like a continuous conversation, or maybe even an argument that never ends. So what keeps this conversation going? What are the gears that are actually turning this engine of constant legal change? Well, Halliday and Carruthers pinpointed 4 key drivers that keep this whole loop spinning. Okay, so think of this like an engine with 4 gears. First, you've got indeterminacy. Basically, no law is perfect. There are always gray areas and loopholes. And what do people do? They find creative workarounds, which forces lawmakers to go back and patch the holes. Gear number 2, contradictions. Laws are often trying to do opposite things at the same time, like protect local jobs, while also opening up to global markets. That built-in tension is just waiting to cause problems. Third, we have diagnostic struggles. This one's all about power. Different groups are all fighting to be the one that gets to say, here's the real problem, because if you control the diagnosis, you control the solution. And finally, number 4, actor mismatch. This is a huge one. You often have people like global experts writing laws from a boardroom in Geneva, and those laws have to be followed by local business owners in Jakarta. That disconnect? It's a recipe for resistance, and you guessed it, more reform.
All right, so that's the theory. But what does this look like out in the wild? Let's jump back to that Asian financial crisis and see how these 4 gears started spinning when immense global pressure slammed into national politics.
We're going to look at 3 different countries: Indonesia, Korea, and China. They were all getting pushed to reform their bankruptcy laws, but how they responded and what happened next could not have been more different. So check out this table. You can see 3 totally different stories here. First, Indonesia. As a developing nation on the brink, it got hit with what the authors call economic coercion. The IMF pretty much said, change your laws our way or the bailout money gets cut off. The result was this constant, exhausting cat-and-mouse game. Then you've got Korea. A much richer country, it faced something called moral suasion. The pressure was softer, more like, hey, here are the global best practices, you should really adopt them. And finally, China. It's a major power, wasn't in crisis, so it experienced normative modeling. They basically looked at global standards like a menu, picking and choosing what suited their own internal politics.
Let's really zoom in on Indonesia and China to see the contrast. In Indonesia, the IMF strong-armed them into creating a new commercial court. But remember that actor mismatch gear? The local businesses, the ones who had to actually use the court, were totally left out of the conversation. So they resisted, they found workarounds, and it forced endless cycles of fixes. Now China was the complete opposite. No one was holding a gun to their head. They took their sweet time, carefully balancing their own internal groups, like workers versus banks, and used global laws as a model to copy from, not a mandate to obey.
Okay, but this brings up a massive question, doesn't it? Where do these global standards and best practices even come from? Who's actually writing the rulebook for the rest of the world?
Well, they don't just fall out of the sky. Holliday and Carruthers point out that there's a whole other recursive cycle happening at the global level.
This is where international norms themselves are constantly being fought over, designed, and redesigned.
And who's in the room where it happens? It's a who's who of global power. You've got clubs of rich nations like the G7. You have the huge financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. You've got official bodies like the UN. Then there are the powerful professional groups, international lawyers and accountants. And of course, you have powerhouse countries like the US, often pulling the strings behind the scenes.
There's a quote from the source material by Richard A. Folk that just nails it. Every world system implies a complex normative architecture. What he's saying is there's this hidden structure of rules and norms that shapes our entire world. And that structure is what drives so much of this push for legal change we see everywhere.
Okay, so we've got these national feedback loops all tangled up with global ones. It's complex, but so what? Why does this academic theory actually matter for us right here, right now?
Because here's the thing, this idea of recursivity is so much bigger than just a story about bankruptcy law in Asia from 25 years ago. It's a powerful lens. It's a tool you can use to understand all kinds of complex systems in our world today.
Really, it helps us make sense of this endless, messy, complicated dance between big global rules, whether they're about finance or climate change or even AI, and the local, on-the-ground reality where those rules actually have to work for real people.
So if you're going to walk away with just a few key ideas, here they are. First, legal change isn't a one-and-done event. It's a feedback loop that never stops. Second, those so-called flaws in laws, the loopholes and contradictions, they aren't bugs. They're actually features. They're what fuel the next round of change. Third, who gets a seat at the table when the rules are being written matters a lot. It can completely change the final outcome. And last, global rules and national laws are stuck in this constant tug-of-war.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to chew on. In this world we live in, a world of global rules and very real local needs, who do you think should get the final say? Who should be the one to write the final draft?